Popular weapons from World War II, Part 1. Thompson Submachine Gun. The first weapon to be labeled and marketed as a submachine gun. The Thompson Submachine Gun, also known as the Tommy Gun, Chicago typewriter, is a blowback-operated, air-cooled, magazine-fed, selective-fire submachine gun invented by the United States Army Brigadier General John T. Thompson in 1918. It was originally designed to break the stalemate of trench warfare of World War I, but was not finished until after the war ended. The Thompson became notorious during the Prohibition era as a signature weapon of various organized crime syndicates in the United States in the 1920s. It was a common sight in the media at the time and was used by both law enforcement officers and criminals. The Thompson was widely adopted by the US Armed Forces during World War II and was also used extensively by other Allied troops during the war. Its main models were redesignated as the M19 2081, M1 and M1A1 during this time. More than 1.5 million Thompson submachine guns were produced during World War II. The Thompson was used in World War II in the hands of Allied troops as a weapon for scouts, non-commissioned officers, and patrol leaders, as well as commissioned officers, tank crewmen, and soldiers performing raids on German positions. In the European theatre, the gun was widely used in British and Canadian commando units, as well as in the US Army paratrooper and raiding battalions, but it was issued more frequently than in the line infantry units because of its high rate of fire and its stopping power, which made it very effective in the kinds of close combat these special operation troops were expected to undertake. Because of the quality and craftsmanship, as well as the gangster era and World War II connections, Thompsons are sought as collector's items. If you're enjoying this video, please give us your like and subscribe to support our channel. Ppsh-41. The Ppsh-41 is a Soviet submachine gun designed by Georgy Shpakin as a cheap, reliable, and simplified alternative to the PPD-40. A common Russian nickname for the weapon is Ppsh, meaning daddy, and it was sometimes called the burp gun because of its high fire rates. The Ppsh saw extensive combat use during World War II and the Korean War. In Eastern Bloc countries, monuments celebrating the actions of the Red Army commonly feature a Ppsh-41. It became one of the major infantry weapons of the Soviet armed forces during World War II, with about 6 million Ppsh-41s manufactured in this period, making it the most produced submachine gun of the war. In the form of the Chinese Type 50, licensed copy, it continued in use with the Viet Cong as late as 1970. The Ppsh is a magazine-fed selective-fire submachine gun using an open-bolt, blowback action. Made largely of stamped steel, it can be loaded with either a box or drum magazine and fires the 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev pistol round with a rate of fire of about 1,000 rounds per minute, a very high rate of fire in comparison to most other military submachine guns of World War II. Something curious about this gun is that after the German army captured large numbers of the Ppsh-41 during World War II, a program was implemented to convert the weapon to the standard German submachine gun cartridge 919 mm Parabellum. the Wehrmacht officially adopted the converted PPSH-41 as the MP41. Unconverted PPSH-41s were designated MP717 and supplied with 763 by 25 mm Mauser ammunition, which is dimensionally identical to 762 by 25 mm Tokarev, but slightly less powerful. The Sten gun. The Sten emerged while Britain was engaged in the Battle of Britain, facing invasion by Germany. The army was forced to replace weapons lost during the evacuation from Dunkirk, while expanding at the same time. After the start of the war, until 1941, the British purchased all the Thompson submachine guns they could from the United States, but these did not meet demand, and Thompsons were expensive, costing $200 in 1939, and still $70 in 1942, whereas a Sten would turn out to cost only $11. American entry into the war at the end of 1941 placed an even bigger demand on the facilities making Thompsons. In order to rapidly equip a sufficient fighting force to counter the Axis threat, the Royal Small Arms Factory, Lee-Enfield, was commissioned to produce an alternative. The Sten is a select-fire, blowback-operated weapon which mounts its magazine on the left. Sten is an acronym from the names of the weapon's chief designers, Major Reginald V. Shepard and Harold J. Turpin, and N for the Lee-Enfield factory. Over 4 million Stens in various versions were made in 1940s, making it the second most produced submachine gun of the Second World War, after the Soviet PPSH-41. However, the weapon was prone to accidental discharges, which proved hazardous. A simple safety could be engaged while the bolt was in the rearwards, cocked position. However, if a loaded Sten with the bolt in the closed position was dropped, or the butt was knocked against the ground, the bolt could move far enough rearwards to pick up a round, but not far enough to be engaged by the trigger mechanism, and the spring pressure could be enough to chamber and fire the round. Though the Sten was somewhat prone to malfunction, in the hands of a well-disciplined soldier who knew what these issues were and how to avoid them, they were less of a liability as otherwise may be suggested. M1 Garand. The M1 Garand, or M1 rifle, is a semi-automatic rifle that was the United States service rifle during World War II and the Korean War. The rifle is chambered for .30-06 Springfield cartridge and is named after its Canadian-American designer, John Garand. It was the first standard-issue auto-loading rifle for the United States. By most accounts, the M1 rifle performed well. General George S. Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. The M1 replaced the bolt-action M1903 Springfield as the U.S. service rifle in 1936, and was itself replaced by the selective-fire M14 Rifle on March 26, 1958. Production difficulties delayed deliveries to the Army until September 1937. Machine production began at Springfield Armory that month at a rate of 10 rifles per day and reached an output of 100 per day within 2 years. Despite going into production status, design issues were not at an end. The barrel, gas cylinder and front sight assembly were redesigned and entered production in early 1940. Existing gas trap rifles were recalled and retrofitted, mirroring problems with the earlier M1903 Springfield rifle that also had to be recalled and reworked approximately 3 years into production, and foreshadowing rework of the M16 rifle at a similar point in its development. Production of the Garand increased in 1940 despite these difficulties, reaching 600 a day by January 10, 1941, and the army was fully equipped by the end of 1941. Following the outbreak of World War II in Europe, Winchester was awarded an educational production contract for 65,000 rifles, with deliveries beginning in 1943. When the last cartridge is fired, the rifle ejects the clip and locks the bolt open, making a characteristic sound. Lee-Enfield. The Lee-Enfield takes its name from the designer of the rifle's bolt system, James Paris Lee, and the factory in which it was designed, the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield. The Lee-Enfield is a bolt-action, magazine-fed, repeating rifle that served as the main firearm of the military forces of the British Empire and Commonwealth during the first half of the 20th century, and was the British Army's standard rifle from its official adoption in 1895 until 1957. The World War I versions are often referred to as the SMLE, which is short for the common short magazine Lee-Enfield variant. Though less accurate than the Springfield rifle at longer ranges, the Lee-Enfield could hold twice the number of cartridges and was capable of a faster rate of fire. The various models of Lee-Enfield rifles were the standard weapons of British infantry troops in both World War I and II. During both World Wars and the Korean War, a number of Lee-Enfield rifles were modified for use as sniper rifles. Some of these rifles were converted to .22 caliber training rifles in order to teach cadets and new recruitees the various aspects of shooting, firearms safety, and marksmanship at a markedly reduced cost per round. In total, over 16 million Lee-Enfields had been produced in several factories on different continents when production in Britain shut down in 1956 at the Royal Ordnance Factory, ROF, Zachary in Liverpool after that factory had been plagued with industrial unrest.